This is a special edition of Air Force Television News with Technical Sergeant David Pullen.
3 years ago, we asked the three senior leaders of the Air Force to sit down with us to discuss the Air Force, its record during the past year, its health, and its future. That initial request became an annual tradition for Air Force Television News and one of our most important programs each year. It gives the Secretary of the Air Force Chief of Staff, and the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force the chance to address the entire service to discuss the Air Force's immediate past, its present, and its future. Well, in the business world, he would be called the CEO. James Roche, a Navy veteran, brings to the office of the Air Force Secretary a long and successful background in the business world. He is one of those who has helped set the business approach tone that permeates President Bush's Defense Department. Technical Sergeant Chris Beck sat down with Secretary Roche to talk about a wide range of topics.
Sir, when you were sworn in on June 1st of this year, you made the statement, "We must now respond to the century's new and emerging national security environment." Did you have any idea how prophetic that statement would be?
I thought in time we would face things that were very different. I didn't realize that we'd face them as quickly as we have. But it's interesting that a lot of the thinking we did in the spring and summer, prepared us mentally to understand what we faced when the 11th of September occurred, although we never had expected it to occur, as I said, quite so early. But that we would be dealing with an asymmetric threat made sense, because we had mastered the skies, we had mastered the seas, we had mastered land combat, and if someone was going to get us, it would have to be asymmetrically. And either you had to assume the world had turned into a very happy, benign place, or opponents would come at you in ways that you were not prepared to deal.
The World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers, the New York landmarks have collapsed and are gone. The Pentagon has been hit by an airplane, a series of hijackings apparently today at the root of this.
And the only reason they do that is because they can't deal with you directly. So coming at us with a stateless organization that's spread out among many countries, supported by countries and others, is a way to get at us because we don't have the normal targets. We can't declare war against a nation. We can't use international laws or international norms. This is something that's very different, that's been building for years and years and years, and we've certainly had warning. And all Secretary Rumsfeld was pointing out was, look, it just is getting closer and closer, and it's going to be a real problem. And I don't think the 11th of September is the end. I think there's more to come. And now we've got to think about adapting very, very quickly to be able to deal with this.
What is the Air Force's role then in Homeland Defense, and is that going to tax the Air Force more?
It is. It really is. Remember, NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, was trying to keep foreign aircraft from coming into our country. We never envisioned that we would have to police our own airspace. And we're tying up well over 100 planes a day, both in terms of those in strip alert, those in cap, AWACSs, etc. That's a mission that was not anticipated. A second mission that was not anticipated was that when we deployed forces overseas, we certainly knew that we had to put Ravens and other people to protect those forces. But we didn't realize that we might have to do it at the exact same time we had to protect the bases at home. Mm-hmm. So we've exhausted the supply of air police and security personnel. We're really stressing that community, just as we're stressing the ISR community. So that's a change. It's a new mission for us, which does continue to exacerbate the problem of aging aircraft, et cetera.
So what's the key to sustaining the Homeland Defense mission from an Air Force perspective?
It really brings forward how smart an idea the total force concept is. By virtue of the Guard, the Reserve, and active forces working together, we were able to respond on the 11th of September and every day thereafter, heavily dependent on our colleagues in the Guard and Reserve, as well as our active colleagues. That's a terrific concept. And it's going to be even more important as the Homeland Defense issue gets debated, because we have so much to bring to bear on Homeland Defense with regard to the air and mobility of moving things around.
I want to shift gears a little bit and move on to aircraft, the F-22 and the Joint Strike Fighter. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us where we stand with each of those aircraft and what their roles will be?
We've gone long enough in the F-22. It's time to go into production, and we need it. We could really use it even in some of the contingencies we're currently facing. It may not be the stealth part that we need, but the supercruise part, the ability to also attack very heavily defended targets, would be very, very valuable to us right now. And to work with our Army colleagues on the ground would be something very, very valuable. But it looks like it's passed all of its tests, it's moving forward, and I think we're going to have a great success in the F-22. The Joint Strike Fighter is a brand new plane. It has to go through a number of years of engineering development, and it's the EMD phase of the program now that we've selected a particular winner. And as it does so, it has to become real. All the software has to be written, and all the pieces have to fit together, and all the weapons have to be integrated, and they have got to be tested. So we don't expect to see any Joint Strike Fighters coming out of the program until something like 2007 or 2008.
So the Joint Strike Fighter and the F-22 complement one another, much like the F-15 and the F-16.
Very much so, very, very much so. And then increasingly, as we've had AWACSs and F-15Cs, we're going to be talking about AWACSs or other air-to-air surveillance systems with these modern fighter bombers and working them together. And if we have to be in the homeland defense business for a very long time, we'll think of air surveillance in more interesting ways and possibly have a new platform for that. Just as we want to have a new platform for the Joint STARS mission. We know that we can have a new 767 base platform for AWACS because we've built a couple of those for the Japanese Air Force already. And we want to be able to have new tankers and have the tankers do more than existing tankers by being able to put electronic apertures on them and organize them electronically, and again to have this transparency of the battlefield. So there's some exciting platform things coming.
The Air Force since the Cold War has become more involved in humanitarian missions. Do you see our role in humanitarian missions continuing?
It's a lesser included case. The C-17 crews who have been transporting from Germany to Afghanistan demonstrates something we can do over and above just moving troops, and they've done a magnificent job. No, our lift, the nice thing about lift, we were talking about platforms, is the lift is being modernized with the C-17, and that's really terrific. So a whole new aircraft is being introduced, and people like the folks in the Army who have to deal with it just want more, and everyone wants more and more. But that part of the force is being modernized very, very nicely.
Base closings is another topic that's resurfaced recently. Do you favor another round of BRAC, and if so, would overseas bases be included?
Well, overseas bases is more a diplomatic issue where when we feel a base is no longer useful, we have to work with the State Department and the host country. The one that people tend to think of when we talk about BRAC or Efficient Facilities Initiative are the bases in the United States. And General Ryan, General Jumper, and I have all argued that we're probably have 20% of those bases we just don't need with the sort of size of force that we have. And one of the things we're doing to be efficient is trying to concentrate where it makes sense. Now, not putting all eggs in one basket, because you never want to do that. You can think, for instance, if we had put every type of one airplane at Homestead Air Force Base and had that terrible hurricane, you know, with the cost to us as a force. But by reducing the spread so that we can be more efficient in the use of inventory systems, et cetera, we probably have 20% more than we need. And in this world where we have to worry about protecting the bases, it means we're stressing, again, our security folks to protect 20% of our bases that we don't need. So yes, I'm very much in favor of it.
What do you want Airman Jones or Sergeant Smith on the flight line to know about Dr. Roche and what he brings to the table?
I don't know. I don't tend to think of myself that much. I think if I were to ask anyone to sort of sit back and say, well, what would I want them to think? It would be that when I'm finished with this tour, the Air Force will be a better place than before I got here. It'll be sharper, it'll be more modern, it'll have spare parts, its education system will be improved, its quality of life will be improved, its standards of performance will be improved. That's what I want.
I would venture a guess that not many on Osama bin Laden's team right now have the time to go plan international terrorism because they're not getting much sleep.
Airman Magazine, in the January Almanac issue, transforming the aerospace force with facts, figures, aircraft, and more. Airman Magazine, look into it now.
Natural disasters can't be prevented, but what if you could prevent the damage? That's what FEMA's Project Impact is all about. So contact your local officials and get Project Impact working in your community.
If the Secretary of the Air Force is the Chief Executive Officer, then the Chief of Staff could be compared to the Chief Operating Officer. And General John Jumper's more than 4,000 hours in the cockpit, plus his assignments to the Pentagon, give him a broad view of the Air Force from both an operational and management standpoint. In his conversation with Technical Sergeant Paul Firman, the Chief of Staff, like Secretary Roche, was preoccupied with the aftermath of September 11th.
Sir, how are we doing as far as Noble Eagle and enduring freedom, and possibly even touching on systems and people?
Well, as always, the thing that's most impressive about this, as impressive as the systems are, the thing that's most impressive in every situation like this is our people. You go out and see great, dedicated airmen doing the nation's business. You see people who are proud of their contribution, and their contribution is unbelievable. You think of the capabilities that the United States Air Force brings to the fight. Who brings those capabilities? It's our people. Marvelous technical capability, marvelous commitment, marvelous dedication and loyalty and patriotism. It's all embedded in what we call the United States Air Force Airmen.
And there's this new thing called Homeland Defense. Talk to me just for a moment, sir, about that new realm.
Governor Ridge is putting together his team. We are talking about today how we're going to organize the military to deal with that situation, the new kinds of equipment and capabilities we might need. All those things will be coming together over the coming weeks and months. But what it means, of course, is that the tempo demands are going to go up. We are going to continue to keep ourselves organized as in our Air Expeditionary Force construct, in Air and Space Forces that are tapped for rotational duties will continue to be tapped for such. And what will be in question is, are we sized right? Are we packaged right? Do we have the right capability packages identified to deal with this combination of contingency world that's beyond the borders of the United States and the terrorist world that is within the borders? But we have C-130s, we have F-16s, we have F-15s, active, guard, reserve, AWACS, all participating in doing the Air Force's part of this homeland defense. It's going to be a big mission, and there's much to learn.
From the beginning, sir, the war on terrorism, it was clear that there was no quick fix. Looking long range, what do you see as the impact?
Well, the President puts it just right. This is a marathon and not a sprint. We are engaged right now in trying to figure out how we put our resources together to track these guys in detail. Who are they? Where do they live? Where do we think they're going to go? Let's not give them a moment's rest. Let's not let them sleep at night. Let's keep the pressure on. Let's track these guys down and get them. That's what the United States Air Force is out there trying to figure out how to do today. And we've made marvelous progress just in the 40 or 50 some days since this operation started. We've got our platforms put together in ways that weren't even possible to do as recently as Operation Allied Force in 1999. We have Predator coordinating directly with gunships. We have Global Hawk and Joint Stars resolving target locations. We have people on the ground with laser spots that are going right up to fighters to do their job. We have bombers doing what we always call close air support and direct liaison with people on the ground. We're figuring this out, and we're going to make it hard for these folks to do their business. I would venture a guess that not many on Osama bin Laden's team right now have the time to go plan international terrorism because they're not getting much sleep.
Hitting a little bit on the personal side, I also heard that you had the opportunity to visit Ground Zero, and in the position that you're in, sir, the curiosity I have is what impact that made on you seeing that and knowing the position you're in today in the United States Air Force.
Well, I did get to visit Ground Zero. It was fairly late at night after we did the Larry King show, and we were taken out there by a bunch of policemen who were obviously very emotionally impacted by the event, and that was still with them. And we stood there at the edge of this debris under the heavy lights late at night, watching the smoke and smelling the acrid smell of burned debris, looking at the surreal landscape of twisted girders and rubble and debris, and imagining, as you looked up, these giant structures that collapsed because terrorists turned our own aircraft back upon us, the death and destruction that resulted from that, and you got angry. And I sat there and I said to myself, we do have to go get these guys, and that's what we're going to do. And I walked away more determined than ever that we're not going to let this rest. The President has it just right, and it's the airmen, the United States Air Force, its airmen, and its great capabilities who can be brought to bear and track these guys down. That's what we're going to do.
And so when it comes to things like F-22, Joint Strike Fighter, there are so many that must be sitting on your desk that deserve and need attention. But what would you say is the most important to you? What needs your attention now?
You really can't put one before the other because you can't ever tell when one is going to be needed more than the other. So we have to, that's why this whole business is a business of balance. We have to balance the appropriate integration of these systems to create the proper effects. The F-22s and the B-2s will come together in a way that will revolutionize the way that we employ stealth. The F-22 will enable us to use stealth 24 hours a day for the first time. It has capabilities that will allow us to, what I call, kick down the door. It can take on anything that's up there in the air, but more importantly, it can also take out those most difficult surface-to-air missile targets that nothing else can do like the F-22 can. Command and control, integrating our space assets with our unmanned platforms and our manned platforms. The future of UAVs to include those with conventional and weapons capability. People say fighter pilots like me are afraid of that. I'm not afraid of that. Fighter pilots will vote for what keeps them alive. And if we can send a stealthy, unmanned vehicle in there to help us take out the worst of those threats, let me guarantee you, all fighter pilots will stand up and shout.
Your chance, sir. Just anything you'd like to add that's on your mind, sir?
I want to make sure that everybody understands out there this message of how important and vital their role is to the United States of America today. It doesn't matter if you're flying the airplanes or you're fixing the airplanes or you're loading the bombs or you're running the computer systems or you're in the chow hall. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You are putting together a part. You are a part that puts together this thing we call air and space power. And without air and space power, this nation could not be doing what it's doing out there today. Everybody plays a part. There is nothing more important in the world that you could be doing today than what you're doing for your nation. Think about that. Look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and be proud of that. You are doing the nation's business. I'm proud of each and every person out there, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
And for us to sustain the Air Force for the long term, we have got to recruit people every year, and the recruiting numbers this year are going to be higher than they were last year.
This is Rodney Harrison of the San Diego Chargers. Rodney helps the United Way build stronger communities by generously spending time with senior citizens and engaging in good citizenship.
That's messed up.
Rodney Harrison and the good citizens of his community.
There is the world you know, and one you can only imagine, where you can navigate satellites or fly without ever leaving the ground, where you can live in the future before it even arrives. When you cross into the blue, everything is different and important.
Especially you.
The Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force is a sort of enlisted personnel executive. Chief Jim Finch represents the interests of almost 80% of those wearing the Air Force uniform. They're the enlisted corps. And in his conversation with Staff Sergeant Michael Noel, it's obvious the Chief has been talking to a lot of enlisted.
I think airmen basically want to be appreciated for those things that they are working on. And certainly we're asking an awful lot out of our airmen and NCOs in today's Air Force. And people want to be appreciated for those things and realize that they're sacrificing for America just like everybody else. And so I think that those are real big issues for folks. There's always a notion of are we going to get more pay, or are we going to, what kinds of things are you going to do to take care of me, or can you fix a particular program? And sometimes it works on an individual basis with people, but by and large it still comes back to the same basic piece, and that is help me make tomorrow better than today.
Oftentimes when we think about quality of life, we think about pay and incentives and bonuses and those sorts of things, but we don't often think about a good place to work. Do you think that enough emphasis is being put on quality of life in terms of the place that you go to work every day as well?
That is a very big piece of quality of life, because quality of life means something different to everybody. It's sometimes easier to work on the pay issues because it's a specific objective. The infrastructure oftentimes doesn't get as much attention, and that is a major issue for our Air Force. We must recapitalize the bases that we have and the infrastructure that's around that. And work environments have taken a high level of interest, if you will. It goes right up there with dorms. We want to fix housing, and but we also fix the workplaces, and that's a big issue.
How have the events of 9/11 affected the commitment that the Air Force places on quality of life?
People know we're at war and have been right now, and that's a very big issue, and it puts a lot of stress on people. But the issues that we tend to work on are much longer term than that. So if you want to work quality of life, you want to fix housing and all of the things, our quality of life priorities, readiness that you want to work on too. All those kinds of issues actually go beyond any specific operation. And so, no, I think that we have to continue to focus on those for the long term and not react to something that might happen in a specific operation.
Chief, we're coming off 2 straight years of extremely high promotion numbers, especially in the E5 and E6 areas. A couple questions. Do you see that trend of high promotions continuing, and what kind of an impact do you think these numbers will have on the future of the force?
Well, I think we're in pretty good shape, but people don't always understand why we did this. The increase in promotions are really a result of 2 things. One, a little bit lower retention than we would like to have, and that's a concern. And the other was a conscious decision to actually boost up the percentage of NCOs relative to airmen in the Air Force. As you do that, you become in a growth industry in terms of promotions. That creates more vacancies, and it tends to be in the staff sergeant, tech sergeant, and master sergeant levels, since we're limited by law to the 1% and 2% in the senior master sergeant and chief master sergeant area. So those increased numbers actually create this push of promotion opportunity and actually a higher level, if you will, in terms of selections. And yes, we have had a record number, and this year the staff list was very, very high. In fact, the chief list was also high when it came out this year. So that's a pretty good indicator. People have then come to me and said, well, gee whiz, are we promoting people too early? And my response to that, which would be to you or anybody else, is we select people based on their potential to serve in the next grade, and it's evaluated based on what their supervisor said, what the supervisor's supervisor said, the rater's rater, if you will. The first sergeant and commander, there's a number of people who evaluate all of this, and if all those people say, hey, this person is ready for promotion, then when the system promotes them, you shouldn't have to say anything about, hey, they're not ready. Also, our goal as NCOs should be, for all of us that we're doing this, should be to take the people who now are brand new NCOs and make them good NCOs. And, gee whiz, when I got promoted from senior airman to staff sergeant in the Air Force, I wasn't sure I was ready to be an NCO, but I stepped up to that, and I watched what other NCOs were doing, and they talked to me and helped provide me the mentorship and the ability to succeed. And I think it's all we really have to do in this. But we were actually doing a disservice, in my mind, to our Air Force by
taking so long to promote people to staff sergeant. We were climbing up above 7 years, and now we've trying to push that back down and get it to a reasonable sense in the somewhere around the 5-year mark is probably about right. The forecasters right now give me indicators that our promotion rate should be relatively good. But I always chuckle when I talk to NCOs, because relatively good means you're either on the list or you're not. If you're not on the list, then relatively good means nothing. So we do try to sort through that. But ultimately, right now, we anticipate that the rates will remain up for the foreseeable future. It's a good time to study.
Last year, recruiting was a very big issue, but we had lots of tools. We had the new ad campaign, new slogan, new symbol, a push to get more recruiters into the field. The question is, how did all those things coming together work?
Well, if you look at the bottom line, which are the results, you'd find that they've been fairly successful, because we met our recruiting goal for the last fiscal year about halfway through the summer. And in fact, we've continued to push and start FY02 with some people in the late enlistment program, which has actually been really very good. I'm often asked which tool, whether it was the ads or the enlistment bonuses or the kicker or putting more recruiters in the field, and all right, well, which one program actually improved recruiting? And to be honest, I think it's a combination of all of those things. You can't single one out and say this is the one that did it, or this is the one pellet that solved this. You've really got to put all of them in. It's the synergy of a collective effort, and it's not just the things that we've thrown money at. It's the leadership and the support that our wings throughout the Air Force have provided to their local recruiters. And we're continuing to push and keep recruiting in the forefront, because ultimately it's like pushing a rock up a hill. And if you let off, it just comes right back down. And for us to sustain the Air Force for the long term, we have got to recruit people every year. And the recruiting numbers this year are going to be higher than they were last year. And so this is always a challenge out here, but I'm very confident ultimately that the tools that we've given in the new ad campaign that's coming out this year, and has come out this past year, will help us in a recruiting sense.
And that's it for this special edition of Air Force Television News. Remember, we do want to hear from you. You can drop us a line with your comments by using our email address, aftvnews@aftnews.af.mil. I'm Technical Sergeant David Pullen.